Hello and welcome to this miraculous and magical Silmarillion film project. I say miraculous and magical because, first of all, we'll be talking about magic tonight, a fascinating topic when it comes to Tolkien and adaptation. And it's also magical and miraculous because our various hosts and co-hosts are all here, largely healthy, recovered from illnesses acquired at or injuries sustained at Moot, an event an event that no one, I don't think anyone ever mentioned how perilous it could actually be.
It's
But
so magical that no one emerges unchanged.
yes,
That's the way it is.
that's
That's the
right.
way it is.
No one emerges unscathed.
Right. Yeah. No, it was awesome. It was awesome. It was so worth it. It was so worth it. It was
So
actually. It
next
was.
time, do you think maybe you might pass through a hedge of swords instead?
No, I'd totally choose it over a hedge of swords. Actually, yeah, every time. Yeah. No, it was actually very affirming. Actually, I got sick afterwards, and of course, it really like forces the question, right? Like, okay, so getting together with people for a weekend conference like that, is it worth it? Like, if you might get sick afterwards. And I did get sick afterwards and was like in the middle of being sick, and I'm like, you know what, totally worth it. I'd do it again. I'd do it again for the same consequence. It was awesome. So anyway, no, Moot was fantastic this year. We had an awesome time. And we did, Dave, you missed, we did a full dramatic reading of episode 1 from this season. So it was good. I totally snagged the best role. I portrayed Huan, which of course was not a speaking role in this episode, but still, I got to play Huan on stage, so that was a milestone for my acting career. That was great fun.
Life goals.
Yeah, exactly. But see, I was also playing the long game, because if ever we go back and do one of the episodes in which he does speak, see, now I'm all ready, so I'll get to do one of Huan's speaking roles maybe someday. But we'll see about that. Anyway, yeah, so today, the topic of our conversation today is magic. This is something that we've dealt with before, off and on. It's come up at various points and in various ways over the course of this. But how to depict magic in a Tolkien adaptation is a really, really interesting question, right? When you think back to things like, why did, in the confrontation between Saruman and Gandalf at Isengard scene, did Peter Jackson feel the impulse to add a fireball, right, to that exchange? And on the one hand, like, it seems a little silly, right? But at the same time, I get it. Like, I can understand the impulse that led him to add a fireball there in some ways. It's non-trivial. This question of how do you depict a fundamentally magical confrontation, given the way that Tolkien depicts those things, it's a really interesting question. And of course, Beren and Luthien, the story of Beren and Luthien is, I think, in the entire Silmarillion, the place where this issue comes most into crisis. So we really need to sit down and think this through. How would we handle that? What's going on here with this stuff? So anyway, that's the topic of our conversation tonight. Quick announcement first. We've got our regional moots coming up soon. So I'm going to be in Ohio at the end of this month for Buckeye Moot. And then we're going to be Denver, Kansas City, Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego, and then down in Australia in January. That's the upcoming schedule for that. We also do have, yes, New England Moot is official in there on October 15th as well. Anyhow, so all of this, that's right here. Right here in New Hampshire near me. But But I wanted to particularly emphasize Buckeye Moot, not only because it's coming up first, but because the registration deadline is very soon. We have to close registration a couple weeks prior to the event for in-person, for on-site registration attendance. So anybody who is in the Ohio area who would like to join us at Buckeye Moot on July 30th needs to register by July 16th, by 2 weeks beforehand. So that's the end of next week, basically, is the deadline for that. So this is the last broadcast prior to that, so I wanted to make sure to emphasize that. If you want to come to Buckeye Moot, please do sign up before July 16th.
And one of the notes of why to go to Buckeye Moot, Karita will be there.
That's right. Karita will be there. Karita's she lives in Indiana, so she's going to be coming over from Indiana to Ohio. Ohio's a really nice spot, kind of, convenient to a bunch of different places. And we are going to be in Cincinnati, so we'll probably, future Buckeye Moots may rove around the state a little bit, but we're starting off in Cincinnati. So yeah, Karita's coming. It's going to be awesome. So that is what is happening. So I hope that folks will be able to join us. Of course, all of our moots are hybrid moots, and so if you can't come in person, you can still attend remotely and participate in the fun that way. But we hope that you'll be able to join us there for Buckeye Moot on July 30th. One other brief thing, I did announce my book, which is now available for purchase. Where's my copy of the cover? Hang on a second. I got too many windows going on over here. Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, ta-da! There's my official book cover. Exploring the Lord of the Rings, Volume 1. Which is going to be covering the first book of the Fellowship of the Ring. So that's from the long expected party up through the Flight to the Ford. I'm releasing this serially, so you can come, you can pre-order it. I'm going to be releasing each chapter as I finish it, about one chapter a month starting in August, and you can join me for that, give some feedback, be involved in the process. It's going to be a really fun sort of community project, which is going to be great. So those people who know my Exploring the Lord of the Rings Tuesday night classes, basically what we're doing here is backing up from the very close, detailed discussions that we've been doing of the Lord of the Rings and looking at the larger patterns and drawing some conclusions. That's the function and purpose of this book. So anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun. Go to press.signumuniversity.org and you can order there and find ways to get involved. So there we go. There's my book too. Okay. First, let's begin our discussion of magic here this evening by going back over some of the stuff that we've looked at before, because we want to remember where we've been here, so we can think of some kind of consistency for how we've depicted things in the past. We have, of course, the Valar, who can casually shape the physical world. That's part of what they do. We were, in some ways, of course, season 1 is kind of a bad data point for all of this stuff because some very different things were going on there. But as I recall, we didn't do much, or we didn't plan much there were some special effects scenes like the overturning of the lamps and stuff, but as far as like when the Valar were doing things, they were tending just to will things and the things were happening, right?
Well, for the most part, but depends on what the thing was. So like the lamps were constructed and it was obviously a magical thing happening. Right. And Ungoliant's running around trapping people with her webs, and that's probably not magical.
Right. Right.
And there's like gathering up of ambient light happening at one point, and that's not a thing that you can actually do in the real world. So, I mean, it was presented in a very matter-of-fact way, in that the characters didn't find anything wondrous about doing these things. Right. But it's still magical.
Right. And most of the wondrous things that the Valar were doing were associated with song, right? Most of the time?
Yeah, a lot of it.
Oh,
not all the
key
time.
One being the production or the creation of the two trees, obviously had song
right.
integrally involved in that process.
Right. Song and dance. Yes.
And
weeping. Yes, exactly. All the essentials.
The key ingredients.
Exactly. Okay, so and the two things that we're pointing out here, like the again, so in the post season 1 world, focusing on the post season 1 world, we have primarily had elves doing magical things and sometimes Maiar doing magical things. And when Melian and Sauron, who have been our two primary Maiar, have been doing things, it has tended to involve song. So we did have Melian. We had the scene where Melian created the girdle during that spider fight that we arranged. And then we also had Sauron's attempt to wreck things at the Merethadarthad, right, which was not only in which he not only used his song and his insidious, malicious, and altogether nefarious hurdy-gurdy, but that he also that was also opposed at the time by Luthien. So we've already seen Luthien and Sauron sort of head-to-head doing an explicitly magical thing through song right there. Okay, so that's one precedent that we've already established, that singing, this trend that singing does make things happen. Like when certain characters are singing, it's one way that we are signaling that magic is occurring.
I do want to point out that it's not always necessary to have song for these magical events to happen. Mm-hmm. So for instance, Sauron necromancy doesn't involve any song, and same with the spell of bottomless dread. Similarly, it's not a musical thing.
Right.
And for Melian, she has her grotto where you can visit and gain insights that might be painful about truth in the future and such.
Right.
And there's not usually song associated with those encounters.
Right. Yeah, the little proto Mirror of Galadriel thing that we did. Yeah. Right. Yes. This, of course, is one of the things that makes Tolkien's magic so complicated, is that very often what is happening in Tolkien's stories is someone basically asserting their will, right? It's the application of will over something or someone, right? Sometimes both, sometimes one or the other. But that assertion of will is often quite invisible and intangible. And this is where you end up with fireballs in the Peter Jackson, because you have what is essentially a wizard's duel, right, between Gandalf and Saruman. Like, they really are matching wills. Their power in whatever sense is involved there, and yet they're just like looking at each other, right? And saying some words, like conversing, basically, but almost all of the actual confrontation between Gandalf and Saruman is completely silent and invisible, and that's hard. That's hard on a visual adaptation, right? To just have, I mean, and this is where you also get into the even more ridiculous than the fireball, staff fight between Gandalf and Saruman in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? Which, oh man, my kids laughed so hard the first time they saw that. But I mean, it's again, like, I get it. I understand why they felt the need to supplement in that kind of way, right? Because the magical confrontation, the confrontation of wills between them, you can't see it.
Right. They went with a much more literal depiction of a duel. Right.
Exactly. Whether it's smacking each other in the face with sticks, or whether it's adding fireballs, in either way, you're making the confrontation between them visible and tangible instead of just this completely silent, invisible confrontation between them. You think of the description, the scene that I always come back to, which has the most explicit description of this, is the confrontation between Gandalf and Denethor in The Return of the King. Remember when Pippin sees, like, it feels like he can almost see like a line between their eyes, right? And like swords, you know, like he gets all metaphorical trying to do, like, Pippin is aware of it. Like he can perceive it from the outside. He's standing there watching and he can perceive, like, so even Pippin is aware that something's happening here. Right. There's like, they're fighting right now, like, and he feels it and tries to describe it almost like, but it's not visible. It's just, he's just using metaphors to try to reach for it. But that moment when Pippin is kind of looking back and forth between Gandalf and Denethor is one of the moments where we're seeing this kind of conflict of will here. Then, of course, you also have the healing of Theoden, which again, Peter Jackson took steps to make more visible, right? And with the, like, disembodied voice of Saruman speaking through Theoden and the whole possession and exorcism thing, in order to give something more to anchor onto than just, why not stand up, walk outside with me and look around and then feel better, right? Which is what you see if you just depict exactly what happens in the book. They just walk up, start talking, and then he, like, stands up and they walk outside and he's like, and Gandalf is like, you don't really actually need to lean on that stick, do you? And Theoden's like, well, no, I don't. I mean, it's just nothing happens, nothing visual happens. And that's the real challenge. Anyway, back to our little survey here. So we've got here magic employed by the elves is our other category. So we've got the sort of the Valoran type magic, right? Which is often, though not always, connected with song. And the question here with the elf magic is especially about that line between magic and technology, right? And this we've kind of skirted in a bunch of places. When elves are doing craftsmanship, right? When they're making something, like when they're making a sword, as we depicted in the Forging of Ringil, or the Reforging of Ringil by Fingolfin, right? Or, of course, the making of the Silmarils, which we didn't show, we didn't give like a full, anime forging montage scene, right? Like we didn't really do that. But anyway, we with the making of the Silmarils, with Eöl, we showed Eöl performing some magic in a couple different places, and in every single spot, we tended to show the material production process, right? Like the forging of the sword, but we did sort of allow this kind of layer of mystery, right? Like clearly when Fingolfin is forging Ringil, there's clearly magic involved. His will, there might be, did he sing? I'm forgetting. Did Fingolfin sing? I think he sang.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe he was thinking about the Helcaraxa.
Right.
In that
right.
scene. At the very least, there's images of his memories appearing, I think, reflected in the material he's making the sword from. Yeah.
Right.
This is in the reforging.
The reforging.
Second forging, yes.
Yes, exactly. So in that scene, what we were attempting to capture is, on the one hand, he's making a sword, right? So we have smithcraft first and foremost, right? But then by showing him singing and then by showing these images, we were basically trying to capture, honestly, most of all, it's sort of Haldir's words, right, about the elf cloaks, right? We put the love of we put the thought of all we love into all that we make, right? So that idea of like them putting the thought of things into things, right? Which to hear Haldir talk about it in the Fellowship of the Ring sounds like it's just like, well, that's just how you do it, right? I mean, it's like, to them, it's not special. It's not magic. This is why there's confusion about what is and is not a magic cloak, right? But that process, that's definitely elf magic, right? To take those thoughts of things, and if we think about it, we set that up. There are ways in which I think it was explicit at the time. If not, it works well in retrospect. But wasn't it? I mean, we were basically thinking of things like the depiction of the Finrod Sauron song battle, right? That whole like evoking of ideas and scenes and memories and things, and using that in the context of a song of power. That whole idea was really what we were invoking there in the Forging of Ringil. So we've had that kind of thing. So, but sorry, Nick, go ahead.
There's also a scene in episode 13 of season 5 where we kind of get a prototypical version of the song battle that we're going to get in this season. You know, we actually have Sauron and Finrod go back and forth. They don't know who each other are at the time. Right. But the style should be a similar thing. Right.
That kind of direct confrontation there. But there should be some uncertainty, just as there is for the hobbits in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? There should be uncertainty. What's technology and what is magic, right? Those boundaries are and really should be very fuzzy.
Right. What can elves just do because they're master craftsmen, and what can elves do because they're elves? And no matter how much you imitated their craftsmanship, a mortal would never be able to replicate. Like, where is that line? And you're not going to figure it out by watching elvish craftsmen do their thing. Because yeah,
it's like yet another reason why it's too bad that they didn't find out earlier that Sam liked rope making, right? Because then we could have had a control, right? Let's see how much they could have taught Sam, right? And then what his ropes would have looked like compared to the elf rope that he got, and see, you know, where the lines are. Presumably, the whole like self-retracting element, rope that will come when you call it, is presumably not something they could have taught Sam in mere rope making technique. But nevertheless, clearly they have superior rope making technique and probably superior materials as well, right? And this is something actually that Tolkien himself emphasized. This was not one of my favorite parts of The Nature of Middle-earth. But it was really interesting when he was talking about Lembas, right? What I didn't like about it is I felt like he went too far in the technology direction and away from the magic when he was basically explaining that what made Lembas was not something special in the process, but it was just all about the grain. Like there was this like special, like magic grain that had come over from Valinor, and if you make the bread with like the special magic grain, I mean it's like you've got it was just about the ingredients apparently, right, more than anything else. And I was like, well, that's a little disappointing actually. I kind of was hoping there's a little bit more in it than just like the special strand of grain, that came over from the West, but whatever,
you were looking for a recipe, weren't you?
I was looking for a recipe. I wanted the magic to be in the cooking more than in the grain. That was, I did want it to be about the recipe more than about the ingredients, but there you go. Anyway, so yeah, the point though is that obviously Tolkien was thinking in these kinds of directions. That is, that a lot of what is magical or appears is a lot of that is technology as well. Like, for instance, I believe that the Feanorian lamps are something like 100% technology, really. I mean, it's not about like they can cast continuous blue flame, and encapture it in crystal. They have some technique, right? They have some technique which, under the proper observational circumstances, one could see exactly how they made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could, in fact, make blue LED lanterns.
Exactly.
With mortal craftsmen. That's possible.
Exactly. This is what led to Michael Basile's hilarious talk a couple years ago at Mythmoot, in which he was arguing that the elves were clearly aliens and this is all just advanced technology, and he was explaining all of the advanced technology they are obviously using. The
metallurgy that goes into their blades, for example, like being able to make your swords glow blue when orcs are close, like there's I have a hard time believing that the elves don't just, with their better connection to the world and their more time spent in it, have a much better understanding of how subatomic physics works than we do.
Sure.
I mean, they just because they don't have spaceships doesn't mean that
right. As far as we know, right?
Yeah.
There is that straight road, though.
West.
Yeah, exactly.
True.
Exactly. Kieran the Shipwright might have upgraded over the years,
Yes.
But no, I agreed. I mean, and that's, I bet you that there are many people who would have a really strong negative reaction to the idea of, elvish as technology in this way. I would understand that, but I do think that there is a lot in Tolkien that suggests this. Part of the mystery that he leaves surrounding this stuff is, I think, a deliberate blurring of that particular line. How much of this is technology and how much is magic? And he describes it from the standpoint, I mean, this is his technique all through The Lord of the Rings, right? To describe things from the standpoint of the people who understand it least, and so therefore leaving it very mysterious. Another example, of course, is the Numenoreans. It's very clear in Tolkien's writings that the Numenoreans were technologically advanced. Indeed, in the early drafts, the first version of the Numenor story, they had planes and steamships, and they were fixing to carpet bomb Valinor when they invaded at the end of the day. And the reason why Sauron's army just vanishes, when they confront Sauron and don't have a battle, because Sauron's army just vanishes, is because they bring their artillery, their heavy artillery, and start to cannonade them. Sauron's stick and sword wielding orcs scatter and flee when under the artillery bombardment of the Numenoreans, and that's explicit. That's described earlier on. Now he backs off from that in later versions, but I don't think that he left that totally behind. And I believe I think very, very, very much things like the walls of Orthanc, right, and the outer walls of Minas Tirith. I don't think that's magic. I think that's technology. That's Numenorean technology that they brought with them, from Numenor. Anyway, but the point
itself, isn't it carved out of just living rock?
Well, again, it's one of those things where he says it looks like it was, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it was, right?
Or maybe they somehow are able to hide seams really, really, really well.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know whether it's it was stonemasonry technology or some kind of metallurgy or whatever that that makes the outer walls of Orthanc ent-proof, right? I don't know. But But anyway, like there's clearly technology and there's clearly magic also, and a lot of what Tolkien does is like it's like where the frontier is and how those things overlap at that frontier are mysterious. He leaves those mysterious because they tend to be described by people who don't understand at all, right? And the whole thing just looks very, very, very mysterious. So. This is one of the things that makes it challenging for us to figure out how to handle this stuff, right? And so we've had some examples, again, like the Forging of Ringil, where we clearly do show magic and magic functioning in the way that we know it does function, right? The combination of technology, craftsmanship, and the investing of the thought and will of the smith into the artifact. This obviously, Nick, you were mentioning like Glamdring and Orcrist and stuff. That seems explicit there as well, that it was like the anger of the smiths, right, against the goblins that is like invests the swords with their hatred of those are swords with emotions. Like remember, Glamdring is totally pumped about killing the Great Goblin, right?
And their special hatred of Balrogs.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because you can't kill a Balrog unless you're wielding one of those swords. It just isn't done.
You can't kill it, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a certain correlation there. Cliffs are helpful. Also,
when we get to a future season and we discuss the construction of magical swords in Gondolin, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. But
some of us are.
Anyway, so as I say, there's been a bunch of things that we've done here. So Luthien's magic. So now we come to Luthien, right? Into the midst of all of these policies comes Luthien. What is she? How do we do? Because, of course, she is an elf, but she's also the daughter of Melian, right? So one question about her is how different do we want to make her? Now, we've already made some moves. In episode 1, we made some moves, right? And it was nothing like brave necessarily that we did, but we showed the whole like flowers springing up as she passes by thing, right? Which is that's not even a normal elf thing, right? That seems to be, if there's one really clear piece of evidence that she does have like Maiar power, right? That seems to me to be one of the most obvious examples of that. I mean, you could say that the whole performance before Mandos would probably not have flown if it had been by an elf, but to me, the like when I dance around flowers spring up, that says goddess, not elf. Galadriel can sing of trees of gold, and trees of gold there grew.
I sang of, yeah.
I know, but still, that's not the same.
I sang a wind there came, and in the branches blew. Like
sure. That means like my will has power, and I can exert that power through my song. That's not the same as I went for a walk and like they're just flowers spontaneously springing up wherever I walk.
Yes, that is, I believe, the climax of Fern Gully when she comes into her earth goddess powers and she walks out and just plants explode everywhere around her.
Right.
I have not seen that movie since I was in elementary school, but my recollection is that was how they said, okay, she's a magical fairy now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, my point is just there's clearly something more than just normal elf about her. And this is one of the reasons why this season is such a crucial moment in this. Crucial moment. I was going to call it a high water mark, but I think that's a vast exaggeration, vast understatement rather. There are very few other times where we're going to need this kind of explicit, the explicit performance of magic on screen that we're going to get in the Beren and Luthien season. We're rarely going to get that again through the rest of the First Age, right? I mean, where? There may be some incidents. We're going to get Glaurung doing his amnesia thing, but he's different.
Depending on what we do with Arendil's story, there's going to be a lot of, and then she turns into a bird, and then he flies his ship into the sky, and now he's a star.
Well, he has some help with both of those two. I mean,
yeah, and presumably her turning into a bird probably.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the Valinorian "Pimp My Ride" sequence that we're gonna get with Vingalot. It's gonna be awesome. But yeah. Anyway,
but if you want another season, it's gonna have that level of magic.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Arendelle, we will get some things, no question. Yeah. Okay. So, but anyway, the point is, this is a major moment, right? And we have a lot of things to do here. So what are the boundaries? What does Luthien do and how that is different from what other elves can do or do?
One obvious contrast we're going to see is Finrod is going to attempt a song duel with Sauron, and it's going to go very badly for him.
Yes.
And then in the next episode, Luthien shows up, and there is a song duel, and it goes a lot differently for her.
Yes.
So song dueling is very much about the inherent power of the person singing, which is why if you put a Maya in there, they'd have an advantage. So like Sauron has an advantage over Finrod in the duel, and Finrod's the underdog, and he tries really hard, but he doesn't make it. Luthien's not an underdog compared to Sauron.
No.
She's just not. She has enough innate power to be on his level. Not the same, like he's a full Maya, he studied under Ale, she doesn't have any of that advantage. But she has something.
She does have something. The other thing she has, though, is innocence, right? I mean, this is important. What takes down Finrod, right? He does great, but Finrod where does he lose? He loses
of Aqualande.
Kinslaying, exactly.
Which wasn't even his fault. He wasn't even there.
I know. But still, anyway, Luthien, she has no such metaphysical chinks in her armor, right? She is sorry, the line that keeps popping into my head, which is not wholly inappropriate, but it's really funny, is a Milton line from his poem, his play Comus, where he talks about the sun-clad power of chastity. But it's like that, like the power of her innocence and good, like her innocence. There's a purity about Luthien that certainly Finrod has lost. He's too. Even you think about, it's not even about guilt with him. It's about grief, right? He's scarred. Finrod is scarred, and Sauron can play on those. He can make use of those scars, right? They become sort of weaknesses in his metaphysical armor, right? Luthien does not have those. That's what I mean by innocence and why I'm thinking of chastity. She has that power.
That's why she's final girl.
What?
So it's a trope in horror movies. The final girl is the final girl because she's a virgin, and that's why she survives. If you are a virgin woman, you have a much higher survival rate of horror films, where virgin men typically not so much, but
it's very medieval, actually. I mean, that's like a deep cultural trope right there. Yeah. Sun-clad power of chastity, man. I can see it's a thing. The horror movies people know it. I'm sure that's exactly what they were thinking of, but it doesn't matter what they were thinking of. Like, see, there you go. It's all there.
It's myth.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, she's got some several things going for her. In addition, as you say, Marie, the whole Maya thing, right? She is not just another elf. Now, how do we now? But it's not just that she has this kind. So, the conflict between Finrod and Sauron is one of the no, I think it is the single case that is most famous, like of overt magic. When people are thinking of an example of overt magic being done, sort of on stage, as it were, in Tolkien stories, the song Duel between Finrod and Sauron is like always, it's like in everybody's top 3, right, of go-to examples to think of explicit magic being woven visibly. And of course,
because
it gets
there's
described.
Nothing else going on there. You
Yes.
can't say like they fought an actual duel with weapons, and then someone was using like magic to help them out. They're standing there singing at each other. That is the duel.
Yeah.
So it clearly has to be magic.
And it's fascinating the way in which Tolkien describes this in an almost... Like he gives us visual descriptions, right? He describes it in. I mean, I was tempted. I think I will use the word. He describes it in an almost cinematic way, right? We get these like cutscenes. He describes the cutscenes, right? That we get of the images and the scenes that the thought that they are putting into their song. That's where the duel. In the text, that's what the duel is, right? It is a duel. It is a conflict of warring images, and conflicting ideas, and those are visually described. And I say visually described because it's not just that he tells us what they look like, but it's chiefly sensory metaphors that he uses, right? He describes the, what the beaches of Aqualande looked and sounded like and everything. So there's that. But Luthien does more than just... Now we've given her that as well, right? Nick, as you said, we gave her a song battle with Sauron in the episode after Finrod. But she also does a bunch of other things as well, right? Now I think we've got a slide about this, don't we? There we go. In fact, it's the next slide. Magical stuff that happens in season 6. Right now, not all of this is Luthien. We've got a bunch of evil magic that's happening. But even just focusing on Luthien for a second, we've got the healings. She heals Beren 3 times. Let's see. She definitely heals him after the prison, after
his arrival in
his weariness and everything. Yeah.
So she helps him out there, and then from the prison,
and then when he's
shot, and then actually also when he gets his hand cut off
to stop the arterial bleed. Yeah.
So 3 times.
3 to 4 ish.
3 to 4, yeah. Because after the prison, like, he's not that wounded. She thinks he's wounded, but he's just grieving Finrod. Right. That's true.
But anyway, it's there's multiple magical healings that go on, and it's clearly magical. So now, Huan does go fetch some Athalas, right? So again, there's some technology involved there too, but there's no question that Beren is up and around again pretty quickly after getting shot in the chest with an arrow. So there does seem to be more than just some good herb lore involved, canine herb lore involved in that. And then, as you say, there's only a certain amount of time she has. Getting your hand cut off is not a joke, right? I mean, that's fairly certain death fairly quickly, and she prevents that. So,
not just cut off, but bitten off.
Yeah.
The chances of gangrene setting in are really high.
Exactly, right. Even if he doesn't bleed out, right? Yeah.
There had been some discussion of the wound being cauterized by the flames coming from inside the belly of the beast.
Right. We were having
after the bite,
fiery. Here. So it can be a little bit helpful, but still, it's a serious wound.
He should go immediately into
shock,
no matter what.
Yes. Yes. But anyway, like, clearly there is healing that's going on here, and so we need to see how she manages that. Then we've got the various magic cloaks involved in this season, of which there are several, right? We have the Thuringwethel cloak, which we've already been establishing. We've got the Wolfheim of Draugluin, which we haven't established, but we'll need to. And then we have, of course, Luthien's own cloak, her own hair cloak, when she does her Rapunzel thing in the treehouse, and weaves the cloak from her own hair that she magically makes grow. And again, like that scene by itself is just like a kind of magic you don't see almost anywhere else in the Silmarillion. It's very unusual. But in addition to that, we have other things. The Shade of Ilenel, right? That's not to be overlooked as an important piece of magic in this season. The enchantment of Anail that we've been kind of preparing for like 2 seasons now, basically, right? As we wanted to show the spell of Bottomless Dread applied in numerous different ways, right? To show, and Anail was always one of our. No, wait, we had 4. It was the four prisoners of Angband scenarios that we were showing, right? You know, we had one.
Rog escapes.
Right, we had the one who escapes and is
right. That's Robin.
Totally clear, right?
And then Anail escapes, but is is
used as a mole.
He uses a mole
unknowingly to himself.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have Agnar's wife.
Yep. Angrod's wife.
Sorry, Angrod's wife. Right.
Yeah.
Wrong one.
Right. Right.
Edelas. Yeah, and so she doesn't really escape. She's more let go, and she's completely enthralled, and kind of breaks it, but kind of dies.
Yep.
So full-on spell of Bottomless Dread for her. And then we have Diriel, who is Curufin's wife, who never escapes.
So right.
So
we wanted to show
a prisoner until
the 4 different outcomes. Yeah, to kind of illustrate what happens to the elves, the range of what can happen to the elves who are captured there. Yeah. Yes. Cool. Sorry. Briefly distracted by the conversation happening in the YouTube chat. It's all good. We'll all make it through this together. Okay. So Thuringwethel is intriguingly almost like the foil of Luthien in the first half of the season. Almost. Right?
It would have been interesting to engineer something more around them. It would have required an immense amount of kind of wrestling the story around to do what we wanted it to do, and I
we wouldn't be able to follow the text as closely.
Not even close. And I mean, granted, the problem isn't Thuringwethel's story; it's Luthien's, right? Like Thuringwethel, we could do anything we wanted with her. She just has to be dead by the time she's dead, right? But the problem is Luthien, and how on earth do we set that up as some kind of a confrontation waiting to happen when Luthien isn't about that. Like, that's not her goal,
right,
to defeat somebody.
Yeah, no, exactly. We don't want Thuringwethil to be like a personal antagonist to Luthien in that way, but she is conspicuously like the female opposite number and the one who's doing all the magic, right? I mean, she's if you look at our list here, she's like the number 2 performer of magic in the whole season, right? Because even Sauron's necromancy, originally she shows him how to do it, right? So she's involved even in the original necromancy. She's the one who then does the Shade of Eilenel thing, right? Uses her magic to deceive Gorlim. She's the one who enthralls Anil, right? So that's all her there. And then of course it's her magic that Luthien is using in order to fly in bat shape to Angband. So yeah, like she's, when it comes to like feats of magic performed in season 6, Thuringwethil is a strong number 2 behind Luthien, and they're the 2 like central female characters of, on the good and the bad side. So that's what I mean when I say that she's like her foil. It's not like, again, it's not like we're setting up a grudge match between the 2 of them, that Luthien is gonna, she's gonna be like a boss that Luthien has to overcome or something like that. But the 2 of them are very much associated in this way. At least it's kind of how it happens. And I think that's, I think it's something we shouldn't be afraid of. Like, especially the Eilenel scene, right? Thuringwethil, in a sense, like Thuringwethil's apex really is going to come there. Like, her success with Gorlim is kind of her high watermark in this season, which is the end of the line for her, right? She's going to accomplish something. She's gonna destroy almost all of the outlaw band, and therefore she's going to be the one. If Sauron is being charged with subduing Dorthonion, she achieves it essentially by, again, Beren is still there and annoying, but it's just one dude and he runs away, right? So anyway,
Evan suggests that Thuringwethil is the black swan to Luthien's white swan, which is an interesting comparison.
It is an interesting comparison, right? But of course, if we think about our theme, right, Thuringwethil is all about placing them in bondage, right? I mean, she captures Gorlim. So watching, it's so like the great feat of magic that we see her perform, she's going to take the form of the Shade of Eilenel, like she can disguise herself. Is that how we're handling that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what she's doing is somehow confusing Gorlim's mind so that Gorlim sees Eilenel,
right,
when he's looking at what is actually Thuringwethil.
Right. So whether she's changing her own shape or whether she's actually just
illusory,
right, like dominating his mind in some way.
And I'm not sure the viewer is going to know which one it is, because we see it from Gorlim's point of view. So as far as Gorlim's concerned, he sees Eilenel.
Right.
But in real life, does Thuringwethil even know what Eilenel looks like?
Right.
Without pulling the image from Gorlim's mind. Like, so she has to be somehow feeding off of him on some level.
I mean, hey, if the salt vampire can do it.
From the original Star Trek. Yeah, that's what I was like. It pretty much comes down to that episode of Star Trek. And yeah.
Right.
And Karita, definitely magic bat powers over magic hair powers. No question.
Flight especially if magic hair powers
to pass up.
Flight is like flight versus invisibility, right? I'm going with flight too over invisibility, I think. But yeah, the magic invisible
Corey,
hair cloak.
I don't think anyone ever thought that you wanted to be invisible.
No, that's not exactly what I normally go for, right? Yeah, you're right. But to fly, no, that would be something better. That would be good. I agree. Okay. So the I'd almost forgotten about that one. Finrod the orc disguises, right? How mechanical. How much of that is going to be, prosthetics, and how much of that's going to be CGI? How much of that is practical effect, that is dressing up cunningly, and how much of that is going to be Finrod's magic? Again, even the boundary there is unclear in the text.
And I think the whole point is that we shouldn't really know how much of it is we stole their costumes and put on some makeup.
Right.
Versus magic. Whereas when Beren and Luthien do it and become Draugluin and Thorin Gwethel, there's no question that's magic, because they've suddenly turned into a bat and a wolf. Whereas you could maybe disguise yourself as an orc with just a little makeup.
Right.
I mean, Sam and Frodo somehow manage it.
Helmets really help.
Samesies.
Right. Yeah. So you put a helmet on. You can't tell him no Lord now.
Right. Yeah. But again, so I get that it certainly is another place where we have a choice to make, right? We could just make just entirely a Sam and Frodo and Mordor situation, right? They put on armor and they put on helmets and pass themselves off as orcs. Whereas certainly the text of the Lay of Luthien makes it explicitly clear that it is Finrod's magic that is they do put on the armor of the orcs, but it's Finrod's magic that is changing their shape. Such like Sauron takes it off right through casts dispel magic, and they're revealed as themselves, presumably without being undressed of the armor first. So again, the magical
dispel magic is.
It explicitly states in the text that when they get thrown in that dungeon, he strips them naked first. So
well, yes, but not before he. Yeah. Eventually, the armor. But I'm saying it wasn't the removal of the armor that was like, what? Oh, look, an elf lord. It was the dispelling that Thu does that revealed them.
Yeah, dispel magic is the most OP spell that one can acquire. It's just super good as when applied at the correct times.
Very true. Though on such a large percentage of days, quite useless as it turns out. But it's challenging in that way. Okay,
but you'll want it if you don't have it.
You'll want it if you haven't got it. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, interesting. You included Talking Huan, which of course certainly does have a sort of a magical element to it, right? Or really a sort of a fairy tale element to it, which, by the way, we haven't even used that phrase, but I think it's best to just sort of acknowledge that, right? The story of Beren and Luthien is the most fairy tale story in all of the Silmarillion. Again, Eärendil has its elements, no question, with the voyages of the mariner and the magic boat and all that kind of thing. But Beren and Luthien is very much a fairy tale kind of story, in ways that most of the Silmarillion stories just are not. And so the talking dog, even the cloaks, right? The I'm going to put on the wolf hame and become a wolf is a very fairy tale kind of thing to happen. Much different than anything that you see in Turin doesn't get in on that kind of action, right? There's no moment in any of those other stories when someone is like, well, let us just put on the hame of this other creature and take his form. Like, that's not on the table in any other stories except the Beren and Luthien story. As I say, it really is a very different, it's like a sort of a different genre of story, but anyway, okay. So, and I think we have to kind of acknowledge that. I mean, I think it's okay to kind of lean into that, to be true to the story. I think it's okay. We don't have to turn away from that, to try to tone that down. To give some other, I don't know, reason or explanation behind, who I'm talking. It's never really explained, right? I mean, it's prophesied that he's going to speak 3 times, but like, okay, why, how, why only 3? Why then? Right? So, like it's none of those questions are questions that are answered in any way by the text. And again, that's very fairy tale, right? One of the things that fairy tales tend to do is resist answering exactly those types of questions. You don't ask those kinds of questions, right? You're told that the faithful hound is going to speak 3 times. End of story. Like that's what's going to happen, right? Don't ask questions. It's like asking the question of like, why, if you ring the bell, someone over there is going to die. Like, you don't ask, like, what's the mechanism that connects one cause with it. It's just, those are the facts. Those are the framing facts of the story, right? Yeah. Brian, I agree. It is more like miracle than magic. There's sort of a boundary there that it would seem almost to cross. But can we talk about the hair cloak? Are we ready to talk about the hair cloak? Because I think the hair cloak, of all of the Luthien's magic thing, that's the hardest to do. Even the healings, she just sings, right? She sings and he gets better, and we can live with that, right? I mean, based on what we've seen already, it's part of her whole bag, right? I mean, like the positive effect that it's like the human version of making flowers spring out of the ground, right? I mean, that she can, lay her hands on someone and sing and they get better. I don't think that will even look weird, really. What I see, by the way, with Beren's hand, right? So Beren's got his hand bitten off. Whether we actually show his wrist charred and cauterized by, I think it's probably better, because nobody really likes a nice arterial bleed on screen. Like, okay, some people really do apparently, but anyway, like I think we can probably do without that. We don't want to go all the way up to TVMA on like Beren's spurting wrist, get a gore rating for the show at that point. But anyway, so maybe better to have him a bit charred. But in any case, he's going to be in agony and in shock, right? And just having her ease him, right? She just like, she sings over him, and he, like, obviously his pain lessens and he falls asleep, right? Is kind of, I think, what we can show. And then she's cradling him, and then the eagles come, right? And take the both of them. So even the healings, I think, are not a huge problem. The hair cloak is a challenge, a significant challenge, I think. So what do you think? Dave, what are your thoughts on the weaving of the Rapunzel hair cloak?
Man, I don't know. I don't know. I liked it. Did you look at any of the concept art?
I did. Yeah. See, we have got some of that, right? Okay, let's see. We got wolf. We'll come back to the Wolfheims. Okay, all right. So here's the prose version here of the cloak stuff. So, we show her with long hair, and then later with short hair and a cloak made of hair. So that's the cop-out version, right? We implied she cut off her hair and made a cloak out of it, right? And there was probably magic involved, but whatever, right? That's the pretty serious cop-out version.
That seems that's a decent backup.
yeah. It's at least not offensive. It is a coward's version, but we could do worse, I suppose, than that. She could sing the cloak into existence. Does she have a spinning wheel and a loom? Right? Do we need to give her tools up there in her tree house in order to do this? So we have some concept art here. These were just little sketches that were made by Catherine. As I recall from Catherine's description, the the difference between these two versions was one was very sort of like hectic, like she's singing and dancing and her hair is swirling around, and as she's singing and dancing and her hair is swirling around, it's getting longer and longer and longer and all like swirling in this huge billowing cloud around her. And so we're showing her hair grow and giving that sense through dance and song of her increasing her hair, and versus her hair just sort of like quietly growing until it surrounds. So the second sketch there of Luthien just like sort of covered in hair, right, is of just like a much more sedate, like she's sitting and singing and like her hair is growing longer until there's like lots of hair all over the place. Can
I just say, I don't know about you guys, I'm definitely leaning in the less is more direction here. I could be persuaded that more is more, but I don't conceive it.
How shocked is my face right now?
Yeah. The other question, as I say, was tools. Do we show her spinning? Do we show her weaving?
Does that make it less magical?
That's the concept art on the next slide. So if you want
to. Oh wait, yeah, the weaving one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got that one.
Okay.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. So so there was a spirited. I forget who wrote the spirited. Who wrote the TED Talk on weaving?
That's from Adola.
Yeah. There's a spirited defense of weaving, and I think she's quite right in her reading that this is not only is weaving a very traditional and indeed a very traditional feminine sort of magic focus, but we see that in Tolkien in various places, and I agree. Like that's the magic of weaving is definitely a thing. And can I also say that using, what is this, episode 5? The Treehouse, episode 5? Yeah. Using episode 5 as an opportunity to set up. I mean, we're gonna like get Vaire is gonna be present, right, in Mandos when we get there, and the halls of Mandos full of the storied webs, right, of Vaire. Weaving's a huge Mandos theme. Mandos place, not Mandos person. A huge Vaire thing and a huge Mandos place theme, right? So the weaving, if we did introduce some element of weaving, that would anticipate and sort of prepare for the whole Mando scene at the end. So we could do something clever there as a kind of anticipation, showing a sort of a foreshadowing, which wouldn't be clear. Like, it wouldn't be obvious what the significance of that was until we got there, right? But it would be kind of cool to see her there in Mandos. We could even show, like, Vaire's loom could be there. We could see Vaire at her loom, or at least just see Vaire's loom. It would be kind of cool to see Luthien herself weaving in anticipation of the weaving. Like, even showing like something in the pattern of her weaving that kind of connects the two would be fun.
This is a pretty good sales pitch.
Okay. All right. So now, but the hair thing is still just weird. Like, it's visually strange. It's something that I think would work really well in anime, but outside of anime does not really work very well. Like, showing an actual actress with like magically growing hair, I think is just going to be weird. Like, it's
gonna look like a horror film.
The longer you linger on it, the weirder it will look. However, if you are going through these kind of like you're fading from one shot to another, and you're only seeing each shot, and in each shot she's doing something a little bit different, right? And you're only seeing each shot for like a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could do it. Like it should.
We're doing the weaving montage.
Yeah, but you can do it. Like,
who doesn't like a good weaving montage?
We're big montage people around here. So
yeah,
there's two main steps to the process, right? Is you have to turn the hair into thread. So that's what either a spindle or a spinning wheel is for. And then once you've got a spool of thread, you then need to weave it to make the cloth that will become the cloak. So you could show those different parts of the process when you're cutting in and cutting out of things. And you don't necessarily need to see her with 20 feet long hair at any point in this process. Right. The fact that her hair is magically growing long, she can then cut it off, use it in her process, and it keeps growing. So she can like have swaths of hair that are like this long and feed them into the thread. And it's not like she needs a 20-foot piece in order for it to work. I mean, wool is maybe this long when you shear it.
True. Sheep don't have you don't have to let the fleece of sheep grow out to be 6 feet long. Yeah.
Exactly. So the necessity of a giant quantity, like a Lady Godiva level of hair, isn't really necessary, as long as she's cutting it as she goes, essentially.
Right.
But to get enough to do that rope to go all the way down the tree, like that's going to be a lot.
Yeah, that is going to be a lot. I think a nice little montage, a nice little magical spinning and weaving montage could be cool. I like the weaving thing with the opportunity for making connections, right? Like the really cool thing, I think, would be to have, when we get to Mandos, the web that is on the loom at that point should look just like Luthien's weaving, right? Or at least be there should be a clear similarity between the two of them, right?
It could be the picture of Luthien making her.
Of Luthien.
I was actually thinking like that it could be
Luthien in the treehouse.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. This is happening in a treehouse, and we've determined that the treehouse is really a tree that has like grown around and to form this little cell that she is in. So there's not a lot of
challenging
space or light or So as far as doing all of this, the dark hair and the shadow might kind of blend in a little bit. I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
I mean,
looms are not small. And I know you can have small looms, and she's
but
not
then
making...
you can't make cloth that's big enough to make a cloak.
Right.
The width of the loom is the width of the fabric. That's how this works.
Exactly. Yeah. So... can the tree help? That is to say, there are several levels of silliness here, right? One level of silliness involves the so Mom and Dad, I'm stuck up in the tree house. Could I get like a loom or something? I'm bored. Like, could you send up a loom and a spinning wheel? Don't ask questions. Just deliver a custom fitted to this really cramped space loom up here for reasons, right? Is weird. Like, that's weird and silly, right?
Do we have Dairon doing that in this?
I mean, look, we could, but seriously,
to deliver items to her.
A different level of silly would be, hey, Dairon, can you smuggle a loom out here? Right? Like, and then Dairon, like, sneaking out with a loom under his jacket. Like, it's weird. Like, it's silly. Like, it's silly. But
I mean, presumably any hole that you could pass a loom through is large enough to pass a Luthien through.
You'd think. You'd really have to think, right? So when I say, can the tree help? What I mean is, could we have her first singing like talking to the tree, right? And the tree has already molded itself in order to make her prison, right? And so if it can mold itself to like help like make a loom and spindle for her out of its branches, like that would not be unlike what has already been done, and would help get the tree off the hook as being complicit with her grumpy dad in imprisoning her in the first place, right? Anyway, I'm just that also would be a way to handle the space issue, right? If the tree itself were forming a loom and spindle for her.
Yeah, because part of the deal is we want this scene to be very much fairy, right? Like there's nothing about this that should feel technology based.
Right.
So having a loom made out of the branches of the tree would definitely lend to the fairy element of this.
That's what I was thinking. And again, and the whole we talked about this, about her relationship with the tree, right?
Exactly.
That we didn't want her just to break out of prison.
That's part of the back and forth between her and the tree to be able to have a loom. And I mean, a drop spindle is really easy. She could have had it on her person when she went up there.
Right. And of all the things for a tree to generate magically, a spindle would not be challenging, right? That would not.
So if she just needs a tree built loom and a drop spindle, she can probably do this without any outside help, and therefore it feels a little bit more magical and integrated into her circumstances.
Any other way to get a loom up there is just going to be comical, like weird.
And doing it without a loom, just like weaving magically in the air. Not gonna look. It's not
right. Unless, like, basically, if we want her to make it out of her hair at all, I think we need to give her a loom. Because if she's just going to be like, I'm magically making my hair grow, then I'm cutting off my hair, then I'm taking my hair and I'm singing, and it's like forms itself into a cloak. Like this, you might as well just have her sing and form a cloak out of shadow.
Yes.
Right. Literally form it out of shadow. Yeah. That would be cooler than her hair at that point. Like, let's just cut the hair out entirely.
That would
make her sing it.
That would be preferable. Although all of those things are dangerously close to fireballs.
Yes, they are. With my with the addition of the tree forming itself into materials and tools.
I like this idea a lot. Where the forming of the hair into the cloak is like pretty straight. It's like this feels authentic in the sense that the forming of the hair into the cloak is like in its, like it's not being performed magically with special effects. It's actually being weaved with a loom.
Right.
We're leaning into like the subtle fact that weaving itself is associated with magic traditionally in fairy tale. And then, but the way we get to the loom is itself magical. It's through this tree. And this tree and the tree we've already established as magical and there to help.
And it's a kind of song magic which is very much, that is not just singing and conjuring or creating something out of thin air, right? There's a real tree there. So through her song, she's interacting with the tree and coming to an agreement with the tree, right? And the tree is willing to help her, and her song and the will of the tree forms the stuff, right? Similarly, her hair actually grows. Like, that's normal. That's a normal thing, right? And so she sings to her hair and she makes her hair grow even longer. She's not just conjuring or creating something. She is creating this. And yeah, you're right, Odolana. Oh, Odolana's here. Cool. Odolana, that the tree is female as well. So yes, we get that whole female magic moment kind of intensify, the cooperative female magic, right, between the tree and Luthien. By the way, do we need to do the rope? Or would the tree just like be totally
let
complicit?
her down?
Yeah, because the tree could just let her down. If
she turns
the tree
into a slide,
is her accomplice, like, we don't necessarily need a rope.
Yeah, I think the cloak is more important than the rope as far as things she needs to have in the future, moving on from the scene, that the rope is literally just to get out of the tree.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And again, I mean, it's cool for, like, you know, Rapunzel reference reasons, right? That sense that Tolkien gives of, like, look, it's like the true story that underlies the fairy tale, the confused fairy tale that came later on about Rapunzel letting down her hair. I like that. That's a fun element, but I agree. I don't think we absolutely have to have that. We get enough, I think, Rapunzel element by showing her growing her hair and spinning it. Besides and I'm sure I said this before. This sounds to me like a thought I've had before. But the way in which we're having her win over, like, sing to and win over the tree, like, where she's not escaping the tree. She's recruiting the tree to her side, right? Is exactly like what she's gonna do with Huan, right? She's gonna talk to and sing to Huan and win him over too. So that
honestly, Namo as well.
Right, exactly. This is kind of what she does, right? So to have the tree be her first accomplice in this way is I think cool. So I could do without the rope. Let's just have the tree set her down. You know, the tree could lower her down on a branch once she has finished with her cloak. By the way, and then at the end, we show the tree closing back up into the original prison shape, right? So that, like, nobody knows that she's gone. Yeah.
Alana says that a distaff, a drop spindle or a distaff were traditionally lovers' gifts. So that actually kind of fits sort of in the wrong way for Dairon, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, so how were we going to have Dairon involved? Did we decide to involve Dairon here?
He definitely has a conversation with her while she's imprisoned in the tree. So we did keep him in this part of the story. Whether or not we need him to be delivering things depends on choices made.
I'm leaving out a key component of this. Sorry. Karita says maybe Dairon can bring the drop spindle. It's much easier to smuggle than a loom. And I immediately put that in my internal adaptation and forgot that other people might not have done so.
Yeah. No, that's that's exactly
right. But exactly since we do have him coming to see her anyway, if he brings her a gift, because he's trying to, like, say, I'm really sorry that you ended up in this prison. I did not foresee this outcome.
Right. And making him actively complicit with his silence, I think, would be fine. Like, he's like that he figures out that there's an escape in progress, right? And doesn't say anything.
Right. We were going to have him explicitly let her go at the end, in the sense that he is well aware that she's running away and he is not raising the alarm. He's letting her go be herself and do her thing.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't Melian in on it too, if I recall?
I think he's sitting next to Melian and they're both like, yep, nothing to see here.
That's right. It's a good thing Luthien is still in maximum security. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Everyone's on board with this.
Thingol would be so mad if he, if anything ever happened to Luthien.
Oh no! Right? Yeah. Everybody better agree to make sure that doesn't happen.
Keeping things from Thingol works out super well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. No, I think that's well established. Okay. So, I think this works. I think we've got but there's going to be song involved, right? This is going to be a singing thing. She's going to be singing to the tree. She's going to be singing to her hair. She's going to be singing while she weaves, right? So that, again, it's not just like her hair always has this property of making you shadowy and invisible, she's imbuing the weave with that power while she's going. So again, that's again a song thing that we show happening. Back to the wolf hames and bat cloaks. Okay. So questions. Do we just show them shrug on cloak and pelt and then poof, they become wolf and bat? Or is there something more to the transformation? We've shown Thorin shift in and out of bat form before. Will there be any differences when Luthien does it? And what difference, if any, is between this and Finrod and his companions disguising themselves? Okay. All right.
I feel like Luthien's transformation should look exactly like Thorin.
Yes, I don't think there should be. Now, one of the things that... All right. I don't think we have any choice here. Unless we're just going to ditch the Bat-Haim entirely, which we can't. I don't think we have any choice. What I dislike is making Thorin cloak just a magic cloak that turns you into a bat feels reductive. Like, that power is clearly at least partially Thorin power, right? She doesn't just happen to have like a D&D style magic bat cloak, which if she dropped it or sent it to the dry cleaners or something and somebody else put it on, we would have exactly the same powers as it had with her. Like, that's the reductive element that I dislike about this and that I wish we could avoid. I don't see how to avoid it. We did a lot of work for years building up to this point to make Thorin have a cloak and associate her cloak with turning into a bat, all with Luthien in mind. And I'm not looking to take that back. I'm just saying it makes me uncomfortable in that way.
The thing, I can make you more uncomfortable, though, because if you want to think about what Luthien would have to do to assume Thorin powers, like, would you like her to maybe, drink blood from her corpse or something like that? Like, there's ways we could imply
there
that
are
she's
mechanisms we could invoke here. Yeah.
And it's worse.
Right.
Oh, so just point of order. I would say that the transformation the transformation itself is a power that Thorin has imbued on her cloak, but you need to be able to tap into a sufficient power source in order to do it, right? I can't throw on Thorin coat and turn into a bat, right? Thorin can do it because she's a Maya and she can tap into her inner power to perform the transformation. So the
cloak is more like a focus item than it is a source of power.
Now, whether or not we'll see that, I don't know. I don't know whether or not
that would argue against the poof version, right? Like, you put on the cloak and then puff of smoke and then bat, right?
Because
in other words, Luthien has to do something.
Cloak. Yeah.
Yeah. Luthien has to do something. She's put on the cloak and sing, presumably, right? Sing herself into a bat. That actually does kind of, I think, maybe convey the whole focus item thing, right? If she puts on the cloak and then is holding up the cloak and she's singing a particularly okay, Phil.
Well, first she has to cast
we
a
need a
spell
batty
of
song. We need a batty song.
Yeah. First, she
song.
needs to sing a spell of identify magic item, right? And then
she has to go through the attunement process first with the cloak.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. So not right, but she's anyway. So she sings a bat song,
right.
And then I don't know exactly. Yes. There are many options, several options. I was personally thinking of Sesame Street, but that will work too. Yes, I was thinking of the Count's Batty Batty Bat song was what was in my head at that point. Neither one of them perfectly harmonious with this scene. But Karina, I knew you'd be thinking about that same thing. I'm so unsurprised. But anyway, right. Okay. So by showing her singing, so we know the power is coming from her, but now she's singing this clearly, somehow Phil has made this clearly bat themed song, and now she turns herself into a bat.
It should be Thorin theme music.
Thorin theme music. There you go.
Like Tolkien sings his own theme music when he goes into battle, right?
Right.
Like his own fanfare, right?
Okay, this is working a little better now, because it's not the action of putting on the cloak that turns you into a bat. Anyone can wear the cloak and they just stand there. But you have to do something to become a bat. Thuringwethil did it by just,
it was
her
thing.
So there was no outward sign, but that's because she was really used to it. And it was her cloak.
But the fact that Luthien, turns into a bat who looks like Thuringwethil, right, in bat form, is still going to show that there is some derivative of Thuringwethil here. Like there is still a sense in which she is using Thuringwethil's magic, using Thuringwethil's focus. I mean, it's not just Luthien creating a Thuringwethil-esque illusion, right? There's still something there. So, but I agree. I think that works pretty well.
I think that Luthien's song does need to have the word Flittermouse in it.
Yeah. Flittermouse. There you go. Yeah. At least that's clearly the title of the track. Right? I mean, no question.
Luthien becomes a cute little bat.
A cute little Flittermouse. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because she's Luthien.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. Now we come
to the gross part.
Yeah. We talked about, I remember objecting to this before. Did we just skip it and punt it until we have to, so we did just avoid this entirely and kick the can down to this moment, did we?
Yes.
I think you said that we were allowed to have a tanned hide that we could throw over him, but you didn't necessarily want to show the process of
skinning Draugluin.
Right. Like, we're allowed to go from Draugluin is dead to here is the tanned hide of Draugluin. You wanted to skip the in-between step.
Oh. Maybe we should figure out how that works first, and then, because what I imagine is that once Luthien has acquired, the cloak of bat shape +5, right? She's able to get in on that super easy, barely an inconvenience, right?
Yeah.
And then she looks over at Beren and is like, "Oh, we gotta do something about this.
There's a problem here." Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's going to require a little bit more effort, because Beren has no power source to tap into, right?
Yeah.
Like, so she has to actively do something.
She's got to help. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And we've just seen the process of her singing herself into bat shape. And so, again, song clearly involved, right?
But she has to sing over Beren, essentially, because he's just going to be like, "I'm just standing here. I don't know how to turn into a wolf."
Right, exactly. How important is it then that we need his whole pelt? I don't know what else we'd have.
I'm just the head. Like, no,
I'm just like,
yeah.
Even if we have it happen off screen, right? Like it's a classic example. It's one of those things you can say that in a book, right? And then they put on the Wolfheim of Draugluin, right? You can just say that sentence, and you don't need any preamble to that sentence. And most readers' minds will obediently skip over all of the incredibly messy and improbable steps that logically have to come before that, right? But you can't do that the same way in a visual adaptation. You just can't. So, I mean, like, whose idea is it to skin Draugluin in the first place? Who's like, what we really need is Huon's idea. Yeah, right. He speaks 3.5 times, the halftime of which is to be like, skin that puppy and strap him up to some, nail him to some logs. That's just what needs to happen. Like, seriously, it's like, why would they do that? I mean, other than to do the disguise. But if the disguise is coming out the way that we're describing,
so
we're gonna have another montage.
No. The other reason to skin your enemy and put his body up on the wall is to make a point.
Right.
Yeah. Like heads on
Bjorn
pikes.
was doing. Yeah.
Right. Or like what Beren was doing with I've got a wolf hame pegged to the wall over there.
Yeah.
Because I don't like wolves.
Same reason I've got a goblin head on a spike over right next to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like if it's something like that left right at the bridge to Tolkien when they leave, that's less of a like unexpected thing.
Okay.
Like if you've got the tower tumbled down and the bridge broken and a wolf pelt right on the gate.
Okay. We're missing some touch here, though. Really, in order to perfect the scene, I'm thinking Beren is saying this, right? Like, okay, the tower's leveled, right? The orcs are all
werewolves
gone.
No more, though. Like, how do you let everyone know that this is no longer the Isle of Werewolves? This is Finrod's island now.
Right. This was the Isle of Werewolves, and it's been de-werewolved, and we can demonstrate that it's been de-werewolved by the nailing up the pelt of Draugluin, which is making me think of Celebrimbor, of course, like in reverse. Yeah.
I think Beren has shown himself to be bloodthirsty enough concerning the servants of Morgoth that he's going to be fine with this idea, and therefore, if it's coming from him, it's okay. And they picked Draugluin because it's the biggest pelt.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. It's certainly most in character for Beren. I mean, I can't imagine Luthien dancing around with flowers springing up and being like, and now, skin Draugluin and nail his pelt to the wall! Like, I don't really see that.
She could be looking at him going, wait a minute, at this moment. Because this is right before the episode where they both are like, wait, marrying the other person is maybe more than I had thought about before.
Right.
So if this is the lead in to her going, wait a minute.
It's best.
Is this
best
really
to
the
know
guy
that your future spouse would enjoy skinning wolves and nailing their pelts to walls in order to taunt their enemies.
We have a tradition on the show of using our enemies' pelts for various items of clothing and whatnot.
As trophies. So. Yes, that's a thing. If it's good enough for Haleth, it's good enough for Beren, right? I can get behind that. But it's still like if he's gonna essentially like recreationally skin and tan the hide of Draugluin before there's even any sense that it's going to be useful. Again, like as a signaling thing, right?
He gets to do something even more demeaning to Draugluin if he in fact tans his hide right there. We probably don't want to show that, but
the tanning process, I really don't think we want to show that. No.
But the idea is
it involves urine.
Exactly. Right.
We're not showing any of that.
We don't need to be nearly so practical as that.
But the death of Draugluin and the need for his Wolfheim are separated in time.
Yes.
So if Luthien were like, "Oh, great, I can turn into a bat now. What are we going to do about Beren?" "Oh yeah, let's go find that like half-rotten werewolf corpse." Is even worse than if they've already prepared the thing and stuck it to the gate. So she goes and says like, "Oh, let's just swing by Tolkien and pick up the pelt. It's on the way." It kind of makes sense. Like if we already introduced it in the story, the audience knows it exists. I think it'll be a little easier of a sell if we like intentionally left his Wolfheim stapled somewhere.
So remind me of the sequencing here. The end of it's episode 6, isn't it? The fight?
7?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 7.
So all this stuff is happening in episode 8.
Okay, right. So the tower, like the episode that ends with Beren Luthien finding Beren weeping over Finrod, right? That's episode 7, right?
Correct.
So opening scene, episode 8, right? Beren nailing Draugluin's pelt, right? So we've skipped over the skinning. Leave it to the imagination of the viewer, the actual process of skinning. But like, Beren with some satisfaction, especially since, remember, the whole, this would be sort of meaningful for him too, given the role of the werewolves in killing Finrod and everything else. I mean, there was he's got some personal werewolf scars there, right? So Beren sort of triumphantly nailing up Draugluin's thing. If that happens at the very beginning of the episode, then we can come back to that later on, and we kind of skim over the. Okay, all right. If we do that, then I think we can do with the pelt, and it does. It seems to fit. When I said, "Do we really need a pelt?" I wasn't suggesting we take some other body part. I just meant, did we need a body part at all? But it's more in keeping with what we've been doing, right? Like the hair cloak and the loom that we were describing, and the back cloak is there. If Beren is the only one who gets a disguise woven for him out of nothing, right? Even Finrod and the orcs, again, there's material there, right? There's already the basic illusion, which is just being enhanced by Finrod's magic. And so the same thing would be true of Beren and Draugluin. So, question, does Beren actually turn into a wolf? He actually turns into a wolf?
I would love to see, this will be the only actual werewolf transformation. Right. In the whole series, right? And we would be remiss in not doing it once.
That's true.
Because our werewolves don't do that, right?
Right. So much so that we don't call them werewolves; we call them wargs, so that people won't get confused and expect them to turn into men at some point.
Right. Exactly.
We can say "I love werewolves" in Sindarin, and then it's the Sindarin word for werewolf.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I agree. The wolf transformation does need to happen. And he's going to remain a wolf
until they get to
Angband, right?
They get to Angband. Luthien does her song and dance, puts the whole court to sleep.
He's under the throne.
Beren is laying under the throne, dead to the world.
Out.
Luthien shakes him awake, and boom, he's a man again, and pulls out his knife because he needs a hand to cut the Silmaril from the crown.
Yeah, exactly.
And Draugluin's pelt is just left on the floor there, and they leave because he doesn't need it again.
Right.
Morgoth is super confused. Wakes up -1 Silmaril and plus one Draugluin
wolf
skin.
Right, Draugluin skin. Right, yeah.
They turn into wolf skins when you drop them.
Right. Yes. The forensic evidence is not clear there. The broken knife too would be a giveaway, which presumably gets left behind as well.
It's also that skin's probably pretty gross at that point.
It's probably pretty gross the whole time.
Yeah. I think so. I don't think he's really gone through an extensive tanning process, especially if he's just nailing it to the wall to make a point. Yeah.
He's gonna need some good masonry anchors to get those nails to stick in.
Yeah. I don't know how we're gonna manage that exactly,
that's just more part of the magic.
That's it. He sings a song of hammering into
and hammering there was.
I mean, presumably there's a gate, right? So you can stretch it over the gate, maybe.
Yeah.
You don't need to nail it to the stone wall.
We just need to have wooden posts in some way. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So the difference between this and Finrod and his companions disguising themselves as orcs, it's more extreme, right? So what I think we show there, I think we go a little bit more Lay of Luthien with it than published prose Silmarillion text with it. That is, they put on the orc armor, right? And when they do, they look like elf lords wearing orc armor, right? And then Finrod sings his song, and they now all look like orcs.
So it's more of a glamour.
Exactly.
Disguise
more of a glamour.
instead of a
exactly.
transformation.
Instead of a transformation.
Turn them into orcs.
That's right. Yeah. And there could even be some way that we could sort of signal that, like to each other, they might not look different, right? But we could sort of show them from the outside and then show them from like their own point of view to show that their appearance has been changed, but they've not been transformed. But what Luthien does is similar in some ways, but is actual transformation. She and Beren actually become wolf and bat. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that works. All right. What else did I skip? Song duel. We talked about the song duel. But let's talk about that more, because I don't think we've talked about it enough.
I mean, obviously, we're going to have to talk to Philip Menzies about the music involved in the song duel. But
yes.
As far as everything else that's happening on screen, that's what I was hoping to kind of talk about tonight. Yeah,
exactly. I think, again, as I was suggesting, it's not like exactly cinema ready, the description that we get in the Lay of Luthien, but he does give us visual and sensory images. We get some sounds and things as well. And the effect in the poetry is almost like cutscenes, as I said, and so I do think that in their songs, weaving their songs in with cutscenes of the scene of the things that they're describing does seem to me a really good way, especially rather than trying to do words, trying to make intelligible words that the audience can follow in the song is tricky. I think would be hard to rely on that. Better, I think, to use imagery.
I think that the expectation of the audience following the lyrics is so low that we should just do it in Cinder and in Quenya. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm looking to go back to the last song duel that Finrod and Fingolfin had. Finrod and Sauron.
Had. Yeah.
Which is in the
season 5, was it?
Script. Yeah, season 5, episode 3 script. I am trying to find it. I can probably find it.
Yeah, the Battle in the Fens of Sarek.
Yeah, here we go. I found it by looking up Gorgol. He was the only character that I knew was only there.
Right.
Okay. All right. Hang on 1 second. Here we go. And oh no, it's another scene after that. Wow, I visited that scene a number more times than I thought it was. Okay, here we go. So essentially, it's a lighter touch than we're gonna have. But Finrod hears the voice, and as the elves look around, the orcs are more monstrous and more terrifying than they were before, and they can kind of hear like this maniacal laughter in there. As Finrod begins to sing in response, his song turns turns the maniacal cackle into a joyous laugh, and the shadow lifts from the elves. Then it actually changes into more imagery, where Finrod's song recalls the stars and the trees in Valinor, and but his song is failing, and then Barrett hears people show up. So what we did there landed in the imagery camp,
right?
with the song behind it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, okay. I'm reading the questions here. Let's do the whole scene. A quick run through of the entire scene. The scene is they've been taken before Sauron on his necromantic Thu seat of power, right? And they're interrogating him. I don't think we go as far as Nereb and Dungalef, but they're getting interrogated, right? And there's, and
they don't know the things they should know if they were works of Morgoth, and they do know the things they shouldn't know if as elves of Nargothrond. Yeah,
right.
So
right.
It's very
this
clear.
This is Finrod's original throne, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, Marie.
Right.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes.
This is Finrod's tower. Yeah.
Finrod's tower.
And therefore his throne room. So as they're giving worse and worse answers to the interrogation, Sauron gets to the point of saying, "Whom do you serve, Light or Murk?" And he goes into the whole repeat your oaths as orcs of Angband, knowing that these are elves in disguise in front of him, and they're not going to say the oath. Yes. So that's the moment where their duplicity is revealed. Right. So like there's a questioning part, but the part where he asks them to swear an oath is we're done.
Turning point. Right. Exactly. So from that moment, I would rather not totally deprive Beren of agency. So the question of is anybody going to use physical weapons at any point during this? I think we need an explanation for why they don't. Because I don't think they're gonna. I don't think there's not gonna be a major swordplay dimension, I think, of this conflict. But I think that needs to be explained. So my first thought is the jig is up, right? Like they're found out. Like it's clear they're asked to swear this oath. They know they're not going to swear this oath, right? So I think plan A, certainly for Beren, plan A is combat, right? So here I see Beren drawing his sword and attacking, and there's like a brief fight. And the other elf lords do the same thing, right? So
it doesn't even have to be brief. It could be continuous through the whole thing.
Well, but so there are a couple options there. So they're fighting, right? When they start fighting, Sauron certainly is not going to get him in fight with a weapon, right? Sauron is just going to begin to sing. And my first imagination of this is that Sauron sings a song, and when he sings, like everything stops. Like that Beren is, whether actually sort of frozen or whether his like mind is overcome or something like. And then Finrod steps forward and sings a song to rebut Sauron's song, and that's how So first we establish that Sauron's song power, like his power through his song, just quells the whole "let's escape this with combat" thing. There's not going to be an escape for combat, and Beren and everybody else wielding a sword is just trapped and helpless by the song of Sauron until Finrod steps forward and fights his song with song. And now we have the focus fully on Sauron and Finrod, and everybody else kind of fades into the distance. Maybe we see still Beren sort of standing there, still holding his sword, but he can't really even move or do anything. And then when Finrod is taken down, like fade to black, and next scene is in the prison, essentially. That's kind of my first thought. What do you now there is the option they could still be fighting and it's just Sauron, but I kind of like the idea that we demonstrate that without Finrod, there's no it's not a chance of like, oh, they almost fought their way to freedom but not quite. Like there's no prayer of fighting your way to freedom from Sauron's throne room.
And we've seen Sauron use song to halt people before, back in season 3 when he took out Maedhros' army with trolls.
Yes.
So Maedhros was completely incapacitated in that sequence by Sauron.
Yeah, we're not diminishing Beren by doing that to him, certainly. Need the confrontation stay static in the throne room? Now I'm just kind of like,
you mean, do they move around in the throne room, or does it have to stay in the room
itself? But like, there's the whole bit in the song about chases and escapes, and you could depict that visually. So there's two ways that I see making that interesting, and one is they are actually actively trying to escape, and like, so obstacles are being thrown in their way by
when he's
Sauron.
Singing about traps opening and stuff. That there's
exactly, and the whole, you know, the changing and of shifting shape and stuff like stuff like that.
So to take that almost as more like a script rather than just imagery.
Right. Alternatively, and this I think would be really cool if we did this, is if we saw that happening, but when Sauron wins the song duel, we find out that was just
they were standing there the whole time.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
It was it was a dream all along.
Right, exactly. Well, that it is because it is a sort of a vision sequence, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's
it has real consequences though, so it's okay.
Yeah, it does.
The reason why it was just a dream is always such a terrible cop-out answer is because it means nothing mattered.
Nothing actually happened, right? Nothing was really at stake. Yeah.
But with Finrod losing this duel definitely matters.
Yes.
So there's a consequence.
Absolutely.
So I'm okay with that. And what I really like about that idea is that I think the easiest way to think of this is Sauron stands here and sings a song, and Finrod stands here and sings a song, and they're completely static the whole time, just singing at each other.
Yeah, no, that's not an engaging visual.
Right. So something much more dynamic where Sauron sends out an attack and Finrod eludes the attack and then like counter strikes. You know, like if there is something that involves them having to move around in a space around one another while fighting magically with words, then it makes the scene a little bit more dynamically staged.
So I could see this in two ways. One, I could see we lose sight after the initial duel begins. Like, so the last thing we see is Finrod standing forward and singing his song, right? Or beginning his song, rather. And then we cut away from the throne room, or we fade away from the throne room or whatever. And so we don't see the throne room itself again until, as Nick said, at the end of the battle, it's resolved and now we realize we've all been there all along. If they're still static, that's fine. Actually, it just shows how dynamic the metaphysical struggle that was happening was, right? And the idea that it's kind of like a dream sequence, but it's more than a dream sequence. It's like a little sub-creation sequence, right? Like what is going to happen is the thing, like either they're going to escape or they're not going to escape. And it's going to be reflected in reality one way or the other. I think it's pretty cool.
One of the things in Finrod's song is strength like a tower. Like, it would be nice if he could build himself a tower.
Right.
In the song.
Right.
And
which could look like the tower that he built that he's standing in the middle of right now.
Yeah, he's
right?
building towers.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, and then, the way you attack a tower is with siege equipment. So Sauron can lob some siege equipment at him in this sequence, but like they're not touching each other. It's all these magical visions like springing up around them.
I kind of like to maintain the illusion that this is an actual escape in progress as much as possible. So that it doesn't
feel like the beginning of a dream vision.
Right. And like the whole bit where Sauron brings up the kinslaying, right? Like they could be in the dream sequence crossing the bridge to escape, and Sauron appears at the end of the bridge,
right,
standing there, and he delivers the final piece of the song, and brings the flashback to the kinslaying, and then when we come out of that, we're back in the throne room again.
Yeah, I mean, there could be. I think it'd be cool if there was like increasing evidence that what was happening was like a dream-ish sequence, right?
Okay.
So that it could like kind of become more and more surreal. Like the transitions could become more and more surreal as it goes through. I think that maintaining the illusion, like a real illusion all the way to the end, so that like people really are convinced that what they're seeing was what was actually happening, and then cutting back. If that illusion is maintained too thoroughly, it'll just be confusing, I think.
I agree.
But if it starts off, but I like the effect of it starting off that way. So we do show them, Marie, kind of moving, right? And then transitioning into like the action sequence that is going to be reflecting the song fight, right? The escaping, the traps opening, the chains snapping, and then, but even the tower, in a sense, Marie. I mean, I kind of like the idea of the strength like a tower. It could look like Finrod's song has like cleansed his tower, right? So that it looks again like it looked back at the beginning of episode 1 when we saw it with Orodreth in it, right? Which again would not be outside the scope of magic that we've shown in other places, right? I mean, that could be a plausible thing, right? That his song has somehow purged the tower, his tower, after all, right? Of the evil that Sauron has brought to it,
turning it into the Tomb of Horrors,
right? But then Sauron, fights back against that. Anyway, so yeah, I think, I mean, obviously I'll leave the details of what happens in the dream sequence to you guys, but I like that. And then at the end of it, again, it becomes more and more, the transitions become more and more surreal, Sauron popping up and whatever. And then finally the image of the kinslaying, right? So, I mean, I think that last image of like, bloody water, lapping up onto the beaches with the gems in them, which we've recalled in episode 1, right? Is like that sort of, to show like Finrod, like the thing that defeats Finrod, right? Is like he's there standing like ankle deep in the bloody water that is, lapping up on the shores of gems.
Right. And like you could do some overlay with the River Sirion being the original source of the water, but once there's blood in the water, then it's Aqualande or something.
Right. Right.
You can do that transition, but I agree that he has to be standing at Aqualande in the bloody water. He can't be on the bridge until Sirion looking at a vision of Aqualande.
Exactly.
Like he has to be physically there.
He's standing there like, and that final, it could be really powerful, right? That last image of Finrod standing in the bloody water, looking around him at the dead elves, on the shore and in the water, and his song falters, right? He just falls silent in grief, and like this is Noldor kryptonite, right? The kinslaying is the Noldor kryptonite, and and his song chokes off and stops. And as soon as he stops singing, there'd be this like frozen moment, right, of silence with Finrod looking around at him, and then boom, dark throne room back there where it all started, and then fade to black, right? Next scene, interior prison, right, as far as Finrod and Beren are concerned. But yeah, no, I think that's pretty I think that's pretty cool.
So is this superior to a fireball?
I think this is better than a fireball. I think it'll do, or like lightning bolts, or other things like that. Yeah. I think that this will work. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted for a moment, thinking ahead to like, are there other times when we're going to want to do something like this, then we're going to want to invoke this? Because of course this is such an iconic moment, but I'm sure
we'll find something.
I'm sure it'll come up. Yeah.
The voice of Saruman sequence when Gandalf and Saruman stare at each other. And,
right. And don't throw fireballs. Yes. Yes. Right. Exactly.
The fall of Dol Guldur.
Right.
Poor Sauron.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. The attack of the White Council on Dol Guldur, as it should have been. Yes.
Not the Green Council.
Not the Green Council. Right. Yeah. Not. Yes. Believe it or not, I do think we could probably imaginatively improve upon that sequence. I think.
And And Brian, actually, I didn't really have that much of a problem with the white bubble versus the black tendril. Like that was
the least bad element.
Yeah, I thought
possibly.
That was pretty. Like I was on board with that.
Mm-hmm. As a visual representation of the conflict of their power, I agree. That was so much less objectionable than Green Galadriel. I can't even say.
All they had to do was bring back the effect from the last movie, and it would have been better.
there were. Actually, I think a theoretically infinite number of things they could have done that would have been better. But anyway. Okay. All right. I think that's most of the things. Isn't it most of the things? Necromancy. Well,
if you
we talked about the necromancy.
That. We have, especially just last time. But if you wanted to make any distinction between how evil magic should appear versus good magic, this would be the time to comment on that. If you have nothing new to say, that's fine.
Same power source.
Yeah, I don't think we do make it very different.
Other than elvish magic. Elvish magic is a little different, but...
Well, it's... So, I mean... On the one hand, there will be certain visual effects that are going to signal it. Like, the visual effect of Glamdring glowing blue is going to be very different from like a Morgul blade, right? Or from the Barrow blade, right? Mary's Barrow,
the flaming
Barrow
swords of the Balrogs,
or Anduril, right? When it, I mean, there's going to be differences all over the place, and so there will be some of these things that are going to be coded. This is evil magic, right? You should be able to tell from looking at Sting and looking at the Morgul blade that one is evil magic and the other is not evil magic. But at the end of the day, it's not a fundamentally different power, Nick, as you're saying. It's, will that is focused in a particular direction, right? So the primary moment that I think we have that seems to me to call for a clearly different sort of visual thing would be the Pot of Evil. The establishment of the Pot of Evil and the magical containment field, the proto alpha level ring of power that Sauron puts around the Pot of Evil, that should be like ominously not looking quite like fire letters yet, but that should have, I think, a visual effect that really sets it aside as something that looks like definitely creepy and evil looking. Whether we do that with like a pale, sickly green color or something like that, I don't know, but...
Also musically...
Yeah, musically it's going to be...
the ring leitmotif is going to be...
Yeah,
there should be a prototypical version of that.
Agreed.
Here.
Agreed. Yeah. No, it goes without saying that almost all of the real power of all of this stuff that we've been describing in this entire episode is going to be down to Philip Menzies. So, I mean, like, it's all going to be about the score.
We just wasted a whole lot of our time.
Really, Phil just needs to solve all of these problems for us, really. But yeah, we'll have a lot to go over with Phil, and I'm sure he's going to be excited to hear all of the problems that he has to solve. We got the weaving song, the hair growing weaving song. We've got the singing to trees. We've got the bat song. We're gonna need a wolf song. We're gonna need obviously the Pot of Evil song.
You mentioned when are we ever gonna want to do a song duel like Finrod versus Sauron again? We haven't really talked about how to do Luthien song before Namo.
True.
And that's kind of a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's not a duel. She's not fighting him.
It's not a duel. Yeah, and I think that's why I wasn't thinking of it in this regard. It's a persuasion. And so, I mean, is there magic involved? Like, yeah, in the sense that any song that powerful is going to be magical is going to deserve the word magical, right? But it's not exactly, she's not like doing a thing. She's not making something happen by the power of her will in that. Unless you consider persuasion an example of one of those things you do by the power of your will. But anyway, it's needless to say, again, that's going to be another excellent Philip Menzies thing, right? But
he even has a composery sounding name.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I think we're good. So next time is going to be the 21st of July. So that's that's 2 weeks from today. That almost works. So we'll be back in 2 weeks on the 21st. And our next session we'll be talking about episode 2, right? So we'll be up to 2. That'll be fun. We're going to have an outline, I think, for 2. Is that the idea?
We're
going to try and have a script.
We've not given up on script yet?
We have
okay.
An emergency writing session happening.
Okay. All right.
We'll
see.
Interrupted it to bring you this broadcast.
Right. Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll see what happens. And the script discussion you guys are going to be holding on the 15th there, the Friday night in between, talking about the frame narrative, getting the first 5 episodes of the frame narrative sorted out. So,
sir, yes, sir.
Awesome. Yeah, so I have my puppy here who's been hanging out with me here tonight. Very well importunately. Behaved. She's very well behaved, though she's been snoring. You might have heard her little snorts over here. She's a Shih Tzu, and they snore a lot. It's adorable. It's really cute. But anyway, like it was just
Both
as well.
Both of my children snore, so
yeah. It was just as well that she was in snoring mode rather than I'm chewing my squeaky toy mode throughout our discussion here this evening. But anyway.
That's another Minds and Hands thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's another Minds and Hands thing. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. Glad to resolve some of these things. I feel much better about some of these scenes that were kind of strange or weird in my head, and I'm glad we've gotten those sorted out. Looking forward to episode 2. That's going to be great. So I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.